What is up? Welcome to Making the Grade. Sorry, we're just a minute late. Had a quick delay, but I am here ready to talk about the Arizona Cardinals PFF grades from the game that was against the Seattle Seahawks. Not the outcome we hoped for, but there are some silver linings that we're going to talk about. It might not feel like that to some fans, but I think there are some definite things to look at here that I think are encouraging signs, at least on one side of the ball. And we'll get into the game as a whole. What is up, Brett? Thanks for being here. We got Brett Jones in the house. Thanks to everyone for hanging out, for watching with us. So let's get into it. So, the game was, obviously it's a loss, 16-6. It's disappointing. The offense really couldn't get anything going, and that's very disappointing. We felt like the offense was getting things moving. In general, just from the eye test, it really felt like the defensive front of the Seattle Seahawks really was a big factor in this. The pass rush was getting after Kyler. They were really stopping the run. I mean, the Cardinals had 49 yards rushing, right? And that has been their strength, right? Running the ball. And they just couldn't get anything going against the Seattle Seahawks, but also you had pressure. They were putting pressure on Kyler Murray. Seattle had 5 sacks on the day, right? The Cardinals also had 5 sacks, so they got some pressure, which is nice, right? And we'll talk about the defensive side of the ball. Big picture, it's disappointing. There was the really bad throw by Kyler. I saw there was a tweet from Kurt Warner talking about, hey, listen, the throw wasn't great, but the decision to throw the ball wasn't a bad decision because he wasn't going to run and make the first down. So you take a shot, right? And the throw wasn't good. That, certainly that pick six made a big difference. Probably, if they weren't going to score if he didn't, throw that ball, likely because they were going to have to punt. But that's, that touchdown definitely made a difference. I think some people will want to put this loss on Kyler, but listen, if the game script or the game result was such that this one mistake from Kyler was the difference, in a 16-6 game, it's not on Kyler, just on Kyler. Like, there were a lot of things going wrong. Quarterbacks make mistakes, even the best ones make mistakes in a game. So that was a big mistake. But if you think that's that, if you want to put it on Kyler, I think you're kind of missing the forest for the trees, so to speak. It wasn't a great game for Kyler. He struggled. The whole team struggled. He was under pressure. So, kudos to Seattle, their defensive front, for really making this, a really tough game for the Cardinals. But listen, this is a road game against a division rival. Those are tough games, right? So this is not, I'm not like panicking because of this loss. The Cardinals, listen, are still ahead of schedule in terms of the rebuild. They're 6-5. They're still, the betting favorites to win the division, and listen, they lost a game against Seattle in Seattle. That'll happen, right? Seattle's right now the division leader. So this is not oh my God, the sky is falling kind of a loss, right? Yeah, the offense didn't look good, but we've seen them not look good and then, look really good. That's just the way it goes in the NFL. So big picture, disappointing loss, but again, a road game against a division rival, it's going to be that way sometimes. But big picture, also, the defense continues to look good because remember, of that 16 points, 7 of that was a result of a pick six, right? So, if you look at that, like, the defense gave up 9 points, right? This is a defense, again, look at the Cardinals in recent games, their defense has looked so much better, right? They gave up 6 points, 9 points, 27 against the Dolphins, right? 15 points against the Chargers, right? So, like, they've looked so much better, like, and again, the results are disappointing, but the defense, that is something to really be excited about. Like, this defense is maturing; they're looking better. The defense had been the big concern, right? And the defense they had another good game, right? And I've talked about this before. People will look at the defensive side of the roster and say, listen, they don't have, they don't have the players to, be a good defense, right? They don't have the names. But some of that is because so many of these players are young, right? And they don't have the names people know about, right? But guys like Garrett Williams are becoming a name that people will know, right? So no, don't get me wrong. They still need to add pieces, especially on the defensive front. But like when you have a young defense, right, with a lot of draft picks playing, those players will continue to get better. And as they get better, the defense is going to get better over the course of a season because these are rookies who are getting more time on task. So it's really nice to see, the defense playing better. It's part player development. I think it's part the scheme kind of really taking hold. So there are some big picture things to be excited about. Ant, thanks for being here. We just need to get our rhythm back from the bye. I think we'll bounce back. Yeah, and that could be part of it too, right? Kind of just having that bye off. So and saying I've been more impressed with Rouse than Petzing, if I'm being honest. Yeah, I think so. Like I know Petzing was really under fire, especially with the passing game. I think what Rouse has done to elevate the defensive play with the young talent is more impressive. I do think Petzing's done some nice things schematically, with especially on the run side of things. But listen, again, year 2 of a rebuild. This team is like, again, you tell any of us that at this point in the season, the Cardinals are 6-5 and right in it for the division. I think every one of us would have signed up for that with what we knew this team was, in the process of in terms of a rebuild. So let's get into the grades. Okay, let's get into the offensive side. Obviously, we see Trey McBride, the stud that he is, leading all the grades, and the rest, the next best were in the 60s. And listen, when your team scores 6 points, the offensive grades probably are going to not be, terribly impressive, aside from maybe one standout or two. So let's look at, as I always like to do, start with the offensive line, sort it by pass blocking snaps to kind of bring them all up to the top. It was a game, right? No one had a great game, but also no one you don't see any dark orange there, right? So, Paris Johnson Jr., 65.4, his run blocking was his pass blocking was okay-ish. Froholt didn't have the best game. Jonah Williams, played well coming back from an injury. Tristan Colon continues to play, listen, this guy backup who stepped into a starting role when Will Hernandez went down, he's played well, right? And Evan Brown had a decent game, right? So, the offensive line was okay. And now I want to look at, though, sometimes that can be a little bit misleading, though, because when I look at the offensive line, what I also want to look at is with Kyler Murray, a couple of the deeper kinds of things. So let's go to the passing stat grades, because that's where it gets some of the stuff we want to see. So, here's the game against Seattle. His grade, we'll talk about that later, wasn't the best, right? But here's what I want to look at. So time to throw. Okay. 3.19 seconds. It was longer than in the past. So you want to look at that like, okay, was Kyler holding onto the ball a little bit longer? Maybe, and maybe that's part of the reason maybe the offensive line was doing a halfway decent job, but Kyler's holding onto the ball too long. And maybe, I don't know if that was the game plan. They were looking, maybe they wanted to take shots. So we look at average depth of target, 8.2 yards versus was, one of the longer average depths of target. So I don't know, so maybe, again, trying to kind of speculate here. If you look at the average depth of target was longer, right? Further than than most of the other games. And they held onto the ball pretty good longer than most games. They might've been trying to take shots knowing that it was going to, kind of more of a defensive battle, trying to make a big play. So when we look at, so maybe, the offensive line's grades are okay, but not horrible. But you look at it and say, well, there were 5 sacks. So how could their grades not be worse? It might be that they were asked to, hold those blocks a lot longer, because you look at the average depth of target and time to throw, right? So that's at least what the data seems to suggest. All right, real quick, a couple comments. Mark Jackson, I'm happy with the season so far. I am right with you there, my friend. Brett Jones saying, why not use Adams in the run blocking game over Colin? That's a good question. He's been better, as a run blocker, and, they're looking to build him as a starter. The tough part is, I think, if you just rotate him in with that specific goal, then you start to tip your hand to the defense, right? If you're just bringing him in for runs blocking snaps, all of a sudden they start to recognize, well, this guy's in, they must be running the ball. So I think if they're going to bring him in, they're going to bring him in for some series. Now, maybe there's a way you can approach that is kind of a nice happy middle. Maybe let's say you're at a point in the game where you know you need to run the ball more, just because you want to, kind of run down the clock, or you sustain a drive. Maybe you go with Adams, right, for that series, right? But and then if you're in a 2-minute drill or something where you're going to be passing more, then you bring Colin in. So they could probably do something like that. For whatever reason they didn't, or they haven't. But I definitely don't think you'd want to rotate him in on a play-by-play basis, because then you start tipping your hand a little bit. But good question, yeah. So offensive line, the grades are mediocre, but not great, not horrible. But when you, again, I think all the sacks probably is at least in part because of how long they were holding the ball, and they were probably trying to take some shots, is what it seems like. Now going next, we have the tight ends. Obviously, Trey McBride, 86.2, 89 in the passing game, 67.2 pass blocking, 66.5 in the run blocking. Trey is just a stud. We know this, right? Brett saying, I also would have went with a heavy package and included Beecham. Potentially, yeah. I mean, they need to do something different, right? So great game by McBride. Ryman, good pass blocking, okay run blocking. On the passing side, not so much, but he's more of a blocker, right? Elijah Higgins, slightly below average grade overall, decent in the pass blocking, right? So, but Trey McBride is the story here. Then we look at the receivers. Gray Dortch, nothing, not particularly good. Pascal had 1 snap, so that's not even worth looking at. Michael Wilson had a nice game, right? 66.3, and the eye test reinforced that, right? Zay Jones on 22 snaps, nothing to write home about. Marvin Harrison Jr. had a slightly above average grade, 64.2. Right around 60 is average, as far as PFF grade. So, receivers had a hard time getting things going. Okay grade for Harrison and Michael Wilson, right? But again, when you score 6 points, that's what you're looking at. Then we'll look at the running backs, right? Trey Benson, halfback, 61.4. Nothing, nothing spectacular there. DeMarcado, 50.9. James Conner, 64.0. His run grade, 57.3, really brought it down. He was decent in the pass blocking and passing, right? But listen, they didn't put much up in terms of running, right? In terms of yardage, and the grades reinforced that they had what we saw. They were having a hard time running the ball. Mark Jackson saying, we've gotten rid of the cancers in the locker room. JG has a team playing like a team. Kyler has matured and is now a leader. We need a few more talented players. Good rebuild by Monty. 100%. They're doing it the right way. They are rebuilding it the right way. They brought in good talent, good system, good culture, and they're just going to continue to add more talent to the draft and let it develop. They've primed the pump, right? They've got things flowing. They've got the draft picks coming in, developing. They've got a culture to bring them into, and every draft class is just going to add more talent to that. And this team is going to continue to get better with what they're doing. So I completely agree. So offensive side, listen, the grades weren't great, but when you put up 6 points, that's what you get, right? So, nothing there is terribly surprising or terribly goes against the eye test. Oh, let's look at Kyler Murray. Forgot to go there. We looked at a couple of the advanced stats. So, 61.8, not a great grade for him. Not his worst, not his best. It's slightly above average, right? Kyler didn't have a great game, but again, the whole offense had a time getting things going. We look at Kyler overall. His overall grade is 80.9, still overall, very good grade. This is just one of his down weeks. I always like to look at the graded throws, the big time throws and turnover worthy plays. He had 2 big time throws and 1 turnover worthy play, right? Which is still, not a bad ratio. It wasn't a great game for him, but again, if you're going to try to hang this all on him, I think he is, he has down games, but I think he is the reason this team is part of the reason they're winning when they win. I think he's playing well overall. And, I still think he's playing like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL overall. So I'm, not the best game, but I'm still, happy with what we're getting from Kyler this year overall. Yeah. So now let's look at the defense side of things. Defense is obviously where we're going to see some better grades. I mean, right at the top, you see Garrett Williams, and who was the cover player on the thumbnail for this live stream. Garrett Williams, what a game, right? 90.8 grade. He had the interception in the end zone, 90.3 coverage grade. If we look at his grades overall through the season, I mean, he's had a couple one down game here against Detroit, but overall, every other game actually has been an above average grade, right? We're talking about 60s average, right? And this is his best game of the year, right? That 90.3, and his overall grade is 78.4. He is having a heck of a season, and we'll look at he's ranked pretty high in terms of cornerbacks for grades, right? Charles Solano, I don't blame Kyler for this one. The O-line was covered. Yeah, I mean, the O-line struggled especially with that pass rush, right? So the running the ball in particular, actually. In fact, if they could have done better job run blocking, I think that that could have been the difference. Like, yeah, sure, those 5 sacks were tough, but like if they could have just got a little something going in the running game, they could have withstood that in such a tight game. So yeah. And same, I'm biased, but Garrett is one of the most underrated young players in the league. I completely agree. I mean, we're all fans, but listen, I think the data show that, right? I mean, people aren't talking about him enough, right? I'm going to give this game to the Seattle defense. Yeah, I mean, listen, kudos to the Seattle defense, right? They stymied the run and they put pressure on in the pass rush. So great game by the Seattle defense. Like that was the difference, right? But yeah, Garrett Williams, just a player to be excited about, right? So this is a cornerstone player. I think a guy who's going to be a Pro Bowl player when people, I mean, he's just playing like that, right? So love what we saw from him. So let's go ahead and let's kind of sort it by cover stats to bring some of the folks up here that are playing more off the ball a bit. So we got Rabbit, slightly below average overall grade. His tackling grade really hurt. That run defense grade was pretty good, right? Coverage grade a little bit low, right? So, but listen, this is a rookie who hasn't played as a starter for most of the season, but he's got some starts with the injury to the secondary. To Jalen Thompson. So, it wasn't his best game, but listen, he's in 2 games in a row getting starting snaps certainly hasn't been terrible, right? So hopefully we'll see him continue to grow and develop. His overall grade is still pretty high because of a couple really good games he's had this season. So, it wasn't his best game, but, he's another rookie that we're developing, right? Murphy Bunting, 57, not a great game for him. He really struggled at, as we know earlier in the season. So this wasn't his worst game, but, but again, overall, the defense did a pretty good job, so can't complain too much. Buddha didn't grade particularly well. He was really good at pass rush grade, like three total pressures and then 1 sack. Struggling to run defensive tackle, okay in coverage, right? But the run defensive tackle hurt him a little bit. Obviously, we had Garrett Williams we talked about. Kaiser White, had an average grade, right? So, okay, he really struggled early in the season, so, we're glad to see that. Real quick, we got AVB, Aaron Van Buren, my good friend. Thanks for the $4.48 super chat. Here is to our first win in Minnesota since 1994. Here's hoping. Minnesota's a good team, but it would be nice to go in there and get a win. I'm going to be jumping on with One Bar and Lepicus, who I've been on with before. There are some Minnesota Vikings content creators. I'm going to be doing a bit with them, a segment with them on Friday. But yeah, it would be nice to go in there and get that win for sure. Yeah, lots of bad tackling grades. Yeah, we saw that, right? Yeah. So Starling Thomas, another bad tackling grade. His coverage. This is a very Starling Thomas kind of game, right? Grade kind of hovering around average. But he doesn't make the big mistake, doesn't make the big play a lot, right? But this is kind of what we've got from him, right? Overall grade 59.8. So, that's kind of very much what we see from him. Mac Wilson, had an okay game, right? Not his best, not his worst. Coverage grade was good, but the tackling brought it down, 63.5. Max Melton had a nice game on 28 snaps, 70.8, 70.5 coverage grade. He actually had a good tackling grade. And this is a player we need to see this from, right? This is a second-round pick who, is we're hoping is going to become that cornerback one, right? We need someone to develop into an outside cornerback one. I know obviously Garrett Williams is playing like a stud, but they're keeping him in the slot, and I think they like him there. I know we've talked a lot about in the past, why don't they move Garrett outside? Well, having a good slot quarterback is very valuable, and if he's nailing that, then you keep him there, and you need Max Melton to develop it, and he's got the tools, right? They just need to coach him up and give him the time on task. But this was a nice game for him, right? In fact, it was his second best game this year. I think it is, right? He had a really good game against Washington, right? And now 70.5, his overall grade 52.8. Want to see him continue to get better. But you look at it, like he's had some really rough games. The Chargers was a really rough game for him. But his last 4 games, he's kind of progressively gotten better, right? So let's hope this is a trend. Because if this is a trend and he keeps grading out like this or better, we talk about those young players developing, and that's the thing that gets this defense better, right? That would be huge. If you got Garrett Williams being what Garrett Williams is, a stud in the slot, you got, between Murphy Bunting or Starling Thomas, one of them holding down one of those outside quarterback spots and at least playing serviceable. If Max Melton develops into this guy who starts to grade in the mid-60s and into the 70s consistently, and continues to grow, that would be huge, right? Right. Then you've got yourself between Melton, Garrett Williams, you've got yourself your 2 of your 3 quarterbacks like of the future just solidified. So let's hope this is a trend and not just kind of a fluctuation, right? So that's encouraging to see, right? Zaven Collins had a really nice game, right? In fact, his pass rush grade, 91.7. We've talked about it with Zaven. That's, developing into an edge rusher. That's been the thing that, he's been good in the others. In fact, his coverage grade was actually his lowest grade, of the lowest part of his grade. Everything else he was really good at today or this game. But like we look at him, like if you look at his pass rush grades, and we've talked about this earlier in the season, in the 50s, right? 40s. He had a nice game against the Chargers, 65, 40s, 50s, right? 50s, right? He's had only 2 games above average, and this being one of them. But he had 4 pressures and 1 sack, right? So here's hoping, right? Again, if he can develop into, an edge rusher who's more than just a run, a guy who sets the edge in the run, right? And moves and, Zaven's great at run defense coverage. He's really good in those areas, right? His run defense of 87 grade for the season, 87.3 is outstanding, right? But if he could just become even an above average or, even around average pass rusher, right? That's a huge boon for them. So let's hope that, if you look at the data at this point, you have to say this is just an on game because the trend has been slightly below average, right? But let's see if he can get more of these above average games in there, because if he can, that could be huge, right? Because obviously we know pass rush is a need for them overall. But again, they got 5 sacks, so that was nice to see. Lucada, okay grade for him, right? 59.2. The coverage grade wasn't great, but he did get a sack, right? The pass rush grade was decent there. Baron Browning, didn't have a great game grade wise. He had 1 pressure, right? Dimikage, not particularly good there. Let's see. We got Papo, he had just 3 snaps, so really can't really speak much to that. Joey Blount on 5 snaps, 64.8. Xavier Thomas, 15 snaps, a really low grade from. This is a guy I know a lot of fans want to see more of him. He's struggled. Like if you look at his grades, it hasn't been great. 37.9 for the season. And yes, he's a rookie. Middle day 3, 5th round pick. He does have 3 sacks, so he's had a couple games where he's got after the quarterback. We need to see a little more from him, but rookie pass rushers struggle sometimes. So Keitrell Clark got his 2 snaps in. They seem to give him just a couple snaps, here and there. Chris Barnes on 3 snaps had graded well, but there's only 3 snaps. Dante Stills, he got a sack. His grade overall wasn't great. His tackling grade was the lowest part, but he did get 1 sack. This is kind of what we're seeing with him. His grades have been in the 50s a lot this season. If you look at it, right, that's That's what we're getting from him. He's down a little bit from last year in terms of grades, but he does have 5 sacks, right? So, he's getting to the quarterback at some points, right? Tonga had a game, 58.6, nothing to write home about. LJ Collier slightly above average. He did get a sack against his former team, right? So, it's as games go for Collier, that's pretty decent. His grades have really struggled overall throughout his career. You look at it, in fact, at 48.5, this is the second best graded season of his career, or third, I guess. He is what he is, a first round pick who struggled, but he's a body, right? But he got a sack this game, so that was a plus, right? Roy Lopez played okay. We like seeing him playing better. He struggled a lot this season, so this was okay, right? And we had a nice game from Naquan Jones. I talked 23 snaps with the 71.7 grade. I've talked about him before. He's a guy who throughout his career has not graded particularly well, but he's had some nice games this year, right? He had a really bad one against the Jets and against San Francisco, but the other games he's played in pretty decent. He's graded 60.9 overall, so average, but for the defensive line that we've had, that's actually pretty good. So, see if he can continue to get some nice games in there. So, real quick, we got Charles saying, we got beat down. We didn't match the energy, but our defense was still impressive. The game hinged on just a few plays. Yeah, I agree for sure. And JG said, those extended plays hurt us. It was torture. Gino had enough time to prepare Thanksgiving dinner back there times. He did, right? And that's rough, right? So, listen, overall, the defense, though, is the highlight, right? Like they overall played pretty well, and there's some players developing that are encouraging. Max Melton, right? Garrett Williams. See if Zayvon Collins, if he can keep putting up some of those pass rush numbers. Real quick, let's look at the Seattle grades on offense. Kenneth Walker graded really well. JSN graded pretty well. Gino had an okay grade, right? DK Metcalf, not too bad. The rest of the offense, not so great, but again, and obviously they didn't put up a ton of points either, right? They put up 9 points if you don't include the pick six, or their offense put up 9 points, right? That pick six is not attributed to the offense. So their grades aren't great. Their defensive grades, got some good grades up at the top. Leonard Williams, Leonard Hankins, defensive line, Ernest Jones, Julian Love, the safety, Tyrese Knight, the linebacker. So, a little bit further down the line, not so great, but they had some nice grades there. And then, overall, when we look at the Cardinals lineup grades, I kind of like to do this towards the end each live stream. Listen, look, these defensive grades, that's the nickel personnel. If we go to the base, it's got Browning in there, right? Collier, right? Then when we go to the nickel, it brings in gets Williams on there. That's it. That just from the kind of looking at this every week, we're seeing more green, right? We're seeing more players in the green on here. We're seeing some players get their grades up and less of the dark orange and red, right? This isn't a great defense in terms of the grades if you look at it right now, but this is, again, this takes into account the whole season. So, overall, you're seeing the defense trend towards better on the field. The scores are showing it, the points allowed are showing it, and the grades are showing it, right? These grade, there's more green in here than there was before. So that's encouraging. On the offensive side, it's also like, this is, the offensive line, look at that. Like, look at all that green, right? This is solid, right? This is, what we like to see. The days of Billy Price with his bright orange, right, are really something of the past, right? This offensive line, they've had, they have their ups and downs in terms of games, but we've talked about it before. It's a weak link position, meaning the most important thing for offensive line is not having, you don't want to have a really bad weak link. Your worst player, you want that high floor. So you'd much rather have 5 decent players on offensive line versus 1 or 2 really good players and a couple really bad players, right? And they are building this offensive line, right? You've got Johnson, obviously first round pick. He's becoming their reliable left tackle. Evan Brown, who they brought in as a free agent, solid grade. Froholt, the guy they signed and they extended to be their center. He's the 7th graded center in the NFL. And, Tristan Cullen, right? Guy, backup, right? Depth piece, having to start. He's a 22nd rate guard, right? And if you remember, this counts both left and right guards. So, there are 60 starting guards in the NFL, right? Or 64. I was told there'd be no math. Anyway, that's solid, right? And Jonah Williams, great. Well, this is a backup who's had to come in and start, right? And they're getting solid play. McBride, the 2nd highest graded tight end, right? I like McBride's play. You and me both. McBride is great, or is elite. Great to see that, right? And Zalon, good to see Zaven play well for sure. Yeah, 100%. So you've got number 2 graded tight end, right? A stud there. Murray's a 13th graded quarterback. Would like to see him bring that back up, but still, that's solid. Connor, 9th grader halfback. The receivers, 22nd for Harrison, 74th for Wilson, 98th for George. You like to see better play, better grades there. But this is a team, the grades reinforce what we're seeing. This is a team that is building something solid and stable. As the young players get better and those grades improve, it's going to elevate this team as they continue to add talent. It's going to elevate this team. So, yeah, disappointing loss, no doubt. But this team is still something to be very excited about. In terms of if you're a Cardinals fan, I think you should be more excited about this team than you have in a very long time with this Cardinals organization, because we have a general manager who's building it in the right way, sustainably through the draft. You have young talent that is going to get better. This is not a team built based on, a roster with a bunch of aging veterans who are going to get worse or get injured, right? You have young players who will get better, right? And, we don't, Darius Robinson, isn't even a factor yet, right? And he's going to hopefully come back and be part of this and develop. So there's a lot to be excited about. This may not be their year, right, in terms of playoff, a deep playoff run. I think they're going to make the playoffs, based on where they're at. But again, in year 2 of a rebuild, they are ahead of the curve, and there's some nice things here. Mark Jackson saying, yeah, I love Monty's work. You and me both. In fact, I named my dog after him. I think y'all know that I did a Twitter poll a while back. I have a dog. His name is Monty. Anyway, listen, it's a disappointing game result, but again, the defense gives us something to be encouraged about. It's a tough game on the road against a division rival. That's what you're going to get sometimes. But now we go to Minnesota and, see what the Cardinals can do there, right? So, all right, well, thanks everyone for being here. This was Making the Grade. I'm going to put up the channel member shout outs, and then we're going to get out of here. And I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving. Be safe, be well, enjoy your time with your friends and family and loved ones. And we will see you all next time. Peace.
Hey, yo, it's Joe. He's the host of Mock Draft Monday.